Wow, I've never heard so many stories about space, and we're going to get some more too. It's my pleasure to introduce Joseph Pelfrey, Senior Executive, NASA Headquarters. I've got a long thing here, and he asked me to keep it short, but one of the most important things I want to bring out early, we got an Auburn graduate, aeronautical engineer, for all you Aubs out there. Prior to his present position, he served as the 15th Center Director of NASA Marshall Space Flight Center. In this role, he led Marshall's nearly 6,500 on-site and near-site civil service and contractor employees and managed its annual budget of approximately $5 billion. He grew up in South Carolina, but he decided to get smart and come to Alabama. He resides in Huntsville, Alabama with his wife, Nicole, and daughter, Adeline. It's my pleasure to introduce Joseph. Come on up.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here with you all, such an esteemed group of community leaders. No doubt they have huge impact on this community and our state, and thank you for what you do. So I want to take you back to 1960. Gary, I just lost my charts. We didn't have charts in 1960. There we go. Birmingham's population was about 340,000 people. Huntsville's population was about 72,000. Gas was 31 cents a gallon. How we miss those days. Gunsmoke was the #1 TV show. And the first working laser was developed in 1960. 1960 was also the year that President Eisenhower flew to Alabama to designate the Marshall Space Flight Center as a NASA field center and transition a workforce from the Army's Ballistic Missile Agency to become the first employees of NASA Marshall Space Flight Center. So this year, as we've celebrated our 65th anniversary at Marshall, it's only fitting that we celebrate with the U.S. Army celebrating their 250th birthday. Our roots run deep with the U.S. Army from the very beginning, and we enjoy a tremendous partnership today, continuing with the tenants at Redstone Arsenal in developing the technologies that we both need to advance our missions as we go forward. So the story of Marshall Space Flight Center is not just through the mission accomplishments that we've had in our 65-year legacy, but it's also through the careers that started or finished at Marshall Space Flight Center. This state has brought the absolute best that it had to offer to help our nation achieve its goals in space exploration and technology development. Individuals who brought their talents, their knowledge, their passion, and their commitment to help do amazing things for humanity. And the people didn't just come for careers, they came to start families, to bring their culture, to invest in communities, and no doubt have left an indelible mark on what we know today as Huntsville and Alabama as a whole. Every day, people from this state and from our communities walk through the doors of either our Marshall facilities or industry or academic partners to bring their talents and their craft to help advance the goals that we have in space exploration and to help our state continue to be a leader in the nation in that area. The work we do is driving NASA's bold missions and the goals that we have to drive innovation through strategic collaboration and continue to advance humanity's movement out into the stars. We do stand on the shoulders of giants. The people that came before us over the last 65 years have no doubt left a tremendous mark on humanity and taught our nation how to dream about accomplishments that we can do outside of planet Earth. Our workforce and the people of this state help usher in human spaceflight with the development of the Saturn V rocket to fulfill President Kennedy's call to send humans to the moon and return them safely. It laid the groundwork for the future missions that would come, the space shuttle era, in which Marshall led the development of all the propulsion systems on the space shuttle for 135 missions. It's an honor to have Dr. DeLucas here, who got to fly on that space shuttle. In my early days of my career, I was a payload integration manager, flying science experiments from his team at UAB to the International Space Station to ensure that they got operated and they could get data back to help advance our understanding of many areas of the scientific world. Through all of Marshall's legacy and expertise, we were selected in 2011 to lead the development of the next rocket and spacecraft, the Space Launch System. And it was a testament to the experience and history that we had for many, many years as a propulsion center for the agency, but also in developing large spacecraft and large space systems. The establishment of the Space Launch System and the initial launch of that vehicle kicked off the Artemis generation. On Artemis 1 in November of 2022, we had an uncrewed test flight of SLS and the Orion spacecraft, which was the beginning of this Artemis campaign to send humans back to the moon for the first time in over 50 years and to eventually send humans to Mars. And once again, Marshall was asked to lead in the development of that effort and continues to lead today with the activities that we have going through the Artemis campaign. Through each step of our legacy and those programs within the center, we have continued to contribute and show the nation what the state of Alabama can bring to achieve those goals, whether it be through our academic excellence, through our industry expertise, and through the work that we do at Marshall within NASA. This community in this state has continued to offer unwavering support and been tremendous partners with us at Marshall as we have endeavored through all of those mission activities. This partnership is most easily seen, and I keep hitting the wrong button, Gary. I'm doing something to shut down those charts. The partnership is most easily seen through the economic impact that we have in the state of Alabama. Now, nobody would be surprised that the government moves at a little bit of pace in getting data, so this data is FY23. But we have over an $8 billion economic impact in the state with the work that NASA does here, with over 35,000 jobs and almost $3 billion of that staying in state through the contracts and procurement activities we have. And so there's no doubt that what we do here in Alabama has a tremendous impact on what NASA does for our nation. But it's not just what's happening in Huntsville. We have small and large businesses across the state that are participating in the mission activities we have, whether it's be from providing hardware or services or engineering support to what we're doing. Just for the Space Launch System rocket, we have over 45 suppliers in the state of Alabama that are providing some piece of hardware, some component to support that rocket. And so this activity is a statewide investment in what we're doing as a nation with space exploration. And it's really a testament to what we can bring to bear to help solve these goals and these challenges we have as a nation. So this year, with our 65th anniversary, we've taken time to celebrate the accomplishments of our community. Gary, you may have to do the slide for me. It's not working. There we go. Thank you. We have taken time to celebrate with our community, with our workforce, with our stakeholders through a number of events we've had this year, engaging with all of our students through the Space and Rocket Center, celebrating all the science accomplishments that we've had as a center. We had the opportunity to do mentoring and be in the schools this year and really inspire that next generation by telling the story of Marshall and what all it's accomplished for NASA. We've been able to celebrate with the community with a big event at the Orion Amphitheater where we were able to bring some of our technologies and displays and share with the community on the kinds of things we do, along with having a number of our astronauts visit to share their stories and contributions and the importance of what we do here in Alabama to the overall mission. And the celebration didn't just happen here. very excited and proud that Representative Dale Strong led the Alabama delegation in resolutions both in the House and Senate recognizing Marshall's 65th anniversary this year. And we are extremely grateful for their continued support and advocacy in what we do here in Alabama to support the nation. These moments of reflection are not just about celebrating the past, but really to solidify our commitment to the future and what we can bring as we continue to look to go further and further out into the universe. And so we're grateful for the opportunity to celebrate and remember the legacy, but also look to the future and the exciting things that we have coming. We took time this year to focus on what should that be? What should our North Star be in guiding that? If we can go to the next chart. We needed to really think about what Marshall was going to be for the future. We knew we could have an exciting future even if it looked different than our past. And so our North Star that we developed is focused on strategic partnerships and collaboration that are key to how we're going to do our business going forward. With this North Star, it gives us the outline of what we're going to do, continue to be a leader in space transportation and propulsion, large space structures, and scientific discoveries that are going to drive the innovation that we need to really push humanity further and further into the universe. Our workforce is the most important part of these accomplishments. And we have just a tremendous team that has brought their talents to bear on what we do each day. And I couldn't be more proud of what our team has accomplished and what they're doing today as we look forward. Gary, next chart.
At the intersection of legacy and a bold future stands a name synonymous with exploration. NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center, established in Huntsville, Alabama, built on decades of achievement and technical expertise. We don't just honor our past, we build on it every single day. Now, with unwavering dedication, we've built expertise and infrastructure to not only honor the past, but to propel us into a brighter future. In this evolving world, we are interconnected like never before. Innovation beckons at every corner. Technology, not just confined to the mighty, empowers even the smallest enterprises to envision systems that were once fantasies of entire nations. At Marshall, innovation is not an idea. It's a mindset. Here, engineers, scientists, and visionaries converge to solve the evolving challenges of tomorrow. From the spark of a concept to the fire of a launch, we forge technical solutions that take humanity beyond tomorrow's horizon, delivering on the mission with every breakthrough. We connect possibility and partnership. We unite innovators with a shared purpose to explore beyond, because the future is built together. Here, collaboration is more than a method. It's our momentum. Because together, we do more than reach space. We reimagine what's possible for our nation, for our world, and for generations to come. This is Marshall Space Flight Center, where innovation begins, where collaboration thrives, where we deliver on the mission and explore beyond.
So with 65 years of excellence behind us and a North Star to guide our future, there is more work to do. NASA has embarked on a campaign to return humans to the moon for the first time in over 50 years. I mentioned the Artemis campaign. We also have goals to send humans to Mars for the first time. And so our teams today are leading the way to advance the technologies that we needed to accomplish those missions. Gary, I'm going to get, there we go. Let's go back one. Go back one chart. There we go. Thank you. So I mentioned the Artemis 1 mission, November 2022. That gave us the confidence to prepare for the Artemis 2 mission, which we're doing right now. So down at the Kennedy Space Center, we have fully stacked the Space Launch System rocket with the Orion spacecraft. and the crew is training for our first crewed flight of SLS that is scheduled to launch maybe as early as February next year. So the vehicle will roll out of the VAB, the Vehicle Assembly Building, to the pad in mid-January. We will do our final test on pad for the rocket and vehicle as the crew finishes up their training with a plan to launch that first weekend in February. We also have launch periods in March and April as well. So this will be the first crewed flight of SLS. We have 4 crew members: Reed Wiseman, Christina Cook, Victor Glover, and Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen. These 4 crew members will launch on SLS and Orion, will do a 10-day mission around the moon, and return back safely, testing out all the crew systems on the Orion spacecraft and the launch vehicle. This will set us up for the Artemis 3 mission, which is our scheduled flight to actually return humans to the surface of the moon in the first time in over 50 years. And that is going to be an extremely exciting and complicated mission, as we are doing it different than what we did during the Apollo days. During the Apollo missions, we went to the equatorial regions of the moon. On Artemis, we will be going to the South Pole. And the South Pole of the moon is known to have water ice under the surface. And if we can extract that water ice, we can separate it into hydrogen and oxygen and make rocket fuel. And so there's a lot of scientific value behind going to the South Pole, which is why it's different. We have areas of the South Pole that are permanently shadowed, that have never seen sunlight, that we believe hold tremendous scientific value as to the undermakings of our universe and the moon. The South Pole also represents the high ground for cislunar space when you think about national security. And there are opportunities with our DoD partners for why it's important for us to establish and beat our adversaries to the South Pole of the moon as well. So even though NASA is a civil agency, the things that we do as an agency have implications for our national security and national security space. To accomplish that mission, we're doing it a little different than we did during the Apollo days. I mentioned we're going to the South Pole, but how we're going to get there is different as well. We have partnered with industry to develop and provide the landers that will be used to take our crews to the surface. Marshall Space Flight Center was proud to be selected to lead that lander program, but it's a different acquisition approach. We have partnered with both SpaceX and Blue Origin to develop the landers that we will use for our return to the moon. SpaceX has been selected for the first flight on Artemis 3 and the next flight on Artemis 4, and then Blue Origin has been selected for the Artemis 5 mission, and the missions beyond that will be selected through competitive continuing services contracts that are yet to be awarded. In this acquisition approach, NASA does not take ownership of the hardware. We are renting a ride to the surface of the moon from these industry partners. It is going to save us a good bit of money because these companies are making their own investments in the development of those landers, which they have the opportunity to use for commercial endeavors in the future as well. So it is a different acquisition approach, but Marshall's leading in this new and innovative way to really be able to accomplish our mission in a constrained budget environment, with working alongside the investments that industry is making today. And if you're not in the aerospace industry today or defense, you may not realize that there is a tremendous growth in the amount of investment that's coming from commercial industry and private equity in the space enterprise. And that helps us focus on the things that only NASA can do, where we can turn things that we have done in the past or the industry can do on their own, we can turn those things over to them and buy those services. And that frees our workforce up to work on the things that there's not a business case for industry to invest in the future. So we're proud to be leading that development of those landers with those 2 partners. Of course, Blue Origin has a large presence in Huntsville there, and we have suppliers for both partners throughout this state. They're making good progress on their designs. The SpaceX missions, you've seen test flights out of Texas as they build up their design for the human landing system. And then Blue Origin is scheduled to launch their first test flight of their lander next year. And it's going to be an exciting milestone for our program, but also our community, because the engines that were built in Huntsville for that lander and tested in Huntsville. To support these lunar missions on the surface of the moon, we need to be able to take care of astronauts for long duration stays on the surface. The Apollo missions were what we call flags and footprints, where we were there just for a short period of time, maybe 2 days, 3 days max. What we'd like to do now is establish a sustained presence on the moon where we can do 30 and 60-day missions with the infrastructure in place to fly regular sorties to the South Pole. This requires a tremendous amount of planning and logistics and hardware to be placed on the surface of the moon. We need habitats. We need environmental control and life support systems. We need a way to move hardware around on the surface of the moon, primarily autonomously, to be pre-positioned before the crew arrives. So these are all areas where Marshall is leading today. We are testing inflatable habitat structures on center today with our industry partners. One of the fun ways we get to test is we get to blow them up to see how the strength of the materials support. So we tend to make as much noise as the Army does blowing things up on the arsenal. We're also testing the carbon dioxide and the oxygen generation systems and the water reclamation systems that we will need to give the crew clean air, clean water, and to remove carbon dioxide. This is where the International Space Station has been a tremendous aspect and tremendous laboratory for NASA to test. For over 25 years now, we've had a continuous human presence on the International Space Station low Earth orbit. It is a world-class laboratory that has allowed us to not only do science experiments like Dr. DeLucas and his team, but also to test the technologies that we need for long-duration human spaceflight. Marshall is the agency's leader in those environmental control and life support systems, and so we've been able to develop the technologies we need and test them on the ISS before we get further out into space and use them on the lunar surface and eventually on the surface of Mars. And so the teams in Huntsville and across this state are bringing their talents and their knowledge to develop these new technologies that we're going to need to keep our crews safe so they can do their mission and really continue to grow our scientific knowledge of what's happening in our universe through our exploration both on the moon and of Mars. We're also able to use some of our unique test capabilities at Marshall to prepare for these missions. We have specialized labs that are able to test the materials for the high temperatures they're going to see both during launch and re-entry. We have a unique laboratory where we're testing the lighting conditions of what the astronauts will see on the surface of the moon. Because of the angle of the sun and the areas that we know we have permanently shadowed areas, there's times during our missions where you only have sunlight for 10 days and you will go a long period of time without sunlight. And so we have to test that environment to be able to train the crews and understand how they're going to navigate and do the mission work even when we don't have sunlight in those areas. So those are just some of the ways where our teams are contributing to what NASA is doing today to prepare for these missions. Very exciting what we have coming up, and our teams are just doing a tremendous job, and I couldn't be more proud of their contributions to what we're doing to support the agency. For our ability to move hardware around on the surface of the moon, we need to understand the different ideas and concepts that industry has, and so Marshall is also leading what we call the logistics campaign. We awarded 9 contracts earlier this year to companies who are bringing us their ideas and innovations on how we're going to deal with all the infrastructure that are on the surface of the moon. You think about when you go to the grocery store, you know where to park, you know where to go get a buggy to grab your groceries, take it back to your car, and drive home. It's not quite that simple on the surface of the moon. We don't have a highway system, we don't have a communication system, we don't have a power grid. All those things have to be developed and established if you're going to have a long-term presence on the moon. We also have the goal to be able to open up the moon for commercial industry. And so we believe it's NASA's role to establish that infrastructure, much like we have here on Earth, to have in place for others to be able to come and use. And so it's an exciting time as we think about having a sustained presence on the surface of the moon where people are living and working on a daily basis. It's what has been the subject of science fiction for many years, but our teams are making it a reality now. So, as we look to the future, we can celebrate the 65 years that this state and our community and our center have contributed to some amazing accomplishments in space exploration. We've long been a catalyst for innovation and growth and will continue to be so through our combined partnerships, both with academia and the industries that we have here in our state, and the expertise that we have across all of those areas that are going to support what the agency is doing. NASA has some big goals, and we have an exciting time in front of us to accomplish those goals. There's a lot of hard work to do, but we're going to continue to be a leader for our nation in that area, bringing the expertise that we've developed over the last 65 years. We are writing the next chapter of innovation here in Alabama, and I'm proud to be a part of it and really appreciate all the support that you guys have. And please join us on the journey because we're just getting started. Thank you very much. So I think I left time for questions. Yes.
So, how many years before there will be a propulsion system that will allow a spacecraft to take off from a runway out at Birmingham Airport and enter space?
Aspects of that technology exist today. We have done what you're really describing, what we would call a single stage to orbit launch vehicle. We have tested that in different aspects in the past. Physics is hard to overcome in that architecture. What you typically will see now, and for example, Virgin Galactic is a company that is doing a lot of what we call air launch stage to orbit with their spacecraft, where you'll take off on an aircraft with a rocket attached to the bottom and then launch it from 60, 80,000 feet. So you kind of give it that extra bump to get off the ground. For large heavy lift transport, you really need more traditional multi-stage to orbit to give you the lift capability that you need. The SLS, for example, has a first stage with 4 RS-25 engines, which are actually from the Space Shuttle main engines that we recovered. The first 4 sets are from the shuttles we took off. It also has 2 5-segment solid rocket motors on the side. During the shuttle, those were 4-segment solid motors, 20% more thrust that we have there. And then it has a second stage, which for the first 3 missions was actually built in Decatur at the ULA plant. And so that 2-stage to orbit concept allows us to fly 70 metric tons to translunar orbit. The evolved configuration of SLS, we're working on an upgrade already that will have a larger upper stage that will fly as much as 130 metric tons. That's the kind of lift capability you need to fly these large spacecraft and landers and habitats that we need to get to the surface. And so for what we're trying to accomplish, that's more the type of rocket that we need going forward. For what you suggested, what we're seeing now is this growth in even space tourism, where commercial companies are flying paid astronauts to be able to go to low Earth orbit. Most of those are still done through a multi-stage to orbit launch vehicle, and that's because of the capability and the propulsive thrust that you need to get off the surface. That answers your question. So we do have the technology. The problem is it just limits you on what you can actually launch in terms of mass. Good question. Yeah, Dr. Deluxe, he's going to give me a hard one.
I know companies are very interested in helium-3 and all that we could get from the moon. Does NASA playing a role to maybe harvest that to have power on the moon?
It's a good question. So we have partnered with a number of companies. First, focus on the extraction technology. So how do you actually extract and then store, whether it's helium-3, hydrogen, oxygen, whatever minerals or compounds that we need to save. And so we have a couple of companies that we're working with to fly some autonomous robotic missions to test that technology. Honeybee Robotics is one that comes to mind that we're working with that will fly on uncrewed landers before the crew gets there to test some of that technology. So that's how we're starting to do that. First is what are the technologies that's needed to do that. We're more focused on right now the hydrogen and oxygen reclamation to be able to make rocket fuel. In terms of powering on the surface of the moon, helium is one aspect. We are focused right now on fission surface power and actually having 100 megawatt reactors that we would put on the surface of the moon to power all the infrastructure that we would need on the surface of the moon. So if you think about where our good friends at Alabama Power here in town provide to our homes, that infrastructure is not in place on the surface of the moon. And so we have to provide power not only for giving the crew the systems they need and the habitats they need, but also things like recovering helium-3 and processing it, storing it, or recovering hydrogen and oxygen and breaking it down to be able to store it. It takes a lot of energy. And so we're going to need more than what just solar energy can provide on the surface of the moon, which is why we're focused on nuclear power systems. If you pay attention to what's going on in our energy world right now, we probably have some people in the room that are very close to it. The idea of small micro reactors is growing to be able to feed all the data centers, for example, and that are being required to use and do all the AI that's happening now. And so it's very akin to what we need to do on the moon. We need that large power provision to support the different mission activities we have. And so helium-3 is going to be an important thing to work on recovering, and I know there's a number of companies that we're working with that are focused on that. Good question. Yeah, I see a couple of hands. Let's go.
Realizing that there have been certain treaty obligations that suggest neutrality or not utilizing lunar space to promote hostile actions against countries on Earth, how does what you have described interface with treaty obligations that we have?
That's a good question. So during Trump's first administration, Administrator Bridenstine was our NASA administrator. He worked with the State Department to develop what we call the Artemis Accords. And the idea behind the Artemis Accords was to establish the framework beyond just the outer space treaty that's in place, that was put in place, I believe, in the 50s. The Artemis Accords was to attract countries to sign up to the peaceful exploration and scientific discovery of space and how we work together in it really advancing all of our knowledge here on Earth. And the commitment to be a part of this Artemis campaign. And so now we've got well over almost 60 countries that have signed up to the Artemis Accords that really signal a commitment to behave in space and how we use the resources that are there. That being said, there are some of our adversaries like China that are not part of the Artemis Accord. And so that is a key point that the nation administration is paying attention to in terms of how we interact and encourage some standards of doing business that we want to operate on when we get to the moon. There is a impetus and an urgency to get to the South Pole before China does, because we don't have commitment from them that they will behave if they get there first. You may see things in the news about NASA may lose the race to China to the moon. Well, we already won. We won in 1969. The difference is we want to get to the South Pole because, again, it has a lot of scientific benefit. It also has a lot of national security benefit to represent the high ground for cislunar space. So the idea behind the Artemis Accords was to try to address what you're pointing to, but we do know that there are adversaries that are not a part of those accords, and there continues to be conversations to make sure that that doesn't become a problem. Well above my pay grade, in partnership with the State Department and the administration, for sure. Yeah, back here.
Around, I see driverless cars more and more places in the United States. I see warfare that's being handled by pilotless planes and drones and things like this. And I wonder, when we started the space program, the best computer we had was the human brain. But I wonder with AI, we're getting to the point where maybe we're going to a lot of unnecessary trouble to put humans someplace that robots can probably do a better job.
That's a good question. I may have to toss to Dr. Lucas. He may have a thought on that too. So there, to your point, there are places that we want to explore to learn that are not very habitable for humans. And today, NASA has over 150 different scientific instruments or spacecraft that are operating today in those environments. And so we very much are taking advantage of autonomous capability, ground control capability, AI control capability to explore further into our universe where we're never going to send humans. And so the human spaceflight missions that you see focus on are those areas where we believe that humans can live and thrive with the right technology to do that. Where we see AI really changing is changing the approach that we utilize the human experience and the human interaction in those missions. Our crews today on the space station spend at least half of their time just maintaining the equipment of the space station itself. It's a large 5-bedroom home that has to be maintained and taken care of. But we are now starting to automate some things through AI and machine learning that can allow the crew to focus on science activities, for example. When we get to the surface of the moon, especially when the crew is not there in between missions on the surface, we still want to be pre-positioning hardware and science experiments and prepare the landing pads for the next lander. So we're developing the technology where all that can be done either autonomously or robotically controlled from the ground. One of the areas at Marshall that we lead for the agency is all the science operations on the International Space Station. We've done that for over 25 years now through our Mission Control Center there. Early on in the program, we needed a lot of the crew's time to actually interface with the experiments, to keep them running, to operate. And now we're able to introduce AI in the commanding so that the crews are not having to there to push buttons to operate a science experiment. We can pre-command through AI and even move to the point of doing predictive commanding so that if it signals a problem, it knows how to respond to that problem without bringing the crew into it so they can focus on tasks that they have to do in there. So there's a lot of examples where we're taking advantage of that computing power and this new technology to really allow us to have the crew focus on the things that technology can accomplish. That technology hasn't gotten to the place, for example, on the surface of the moon when a crew member is going to be studying maybe a rock formation, is knowing which rock to go pick up based on what they've learned in the geology that they're trying to understand. It will at some point, I think, get there, but today it's not there. And so the idea of having that crew interaction is still to help us really advance the knowledge that these AI systems haven't been trained to do. Those language models that drive those AI systems are all built on knowledge that we've gained through human science interaction. And so there's still that component we believe is very important to the overall mission. Good question. You guys have challenged me today.
First, thank you for your presentation. It's great. As a kid, my dad took me to the Alabama State Legislature here. There, their fun mom tell us about what we think as a kid. It's amazing what the progress is working. You know, it's hard to distinguish between real news and fake news, but I try to watch whatever I can, and I learned some things just in the last week or some things in reports. Hypersonic missiles were behind Russia and China. We don't have them. China just launched a major aircraft carrier, quite impressive, and they're really invading much faster. And I hear lately that we're going to sell some of our best chips to
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. A lot of NASA's technologies that we need have dual use purpose, which is why we have a lot of partnerships with Department of War agencies, because you mentioned hypersonics, for example, there's a lot of the materials and the propulsion technologies that we have developed for civil space activities that apply to the hypersonic regime and the use of those vehicles for national security reasons. So there's a lot of partnership between NASA and Department of War in the dual-use technology development. As a taxpayer, I appreciate that we're only spending the money once to develop a technology, even if we use it in different ways for our different mission sets. Maintaining NASA as a civil agency has been a priority for the administration, and so the aspects of what China's doing from a defense standpoint and national security standpoint, we typically don't engage in as much. We try to stay on the civil side. But to your question on what we need and what I think you're going to see out of our hopefully soon to be confirmed new administrator is a sense of urgency that we've struggled to maintain over the last number of years through changes in leadership and administration and congressional priorities that don't provide the steady budgets that we need to really have that constancy of purpose in the missions. We can't accomplish our missions on four-year centers tied to changes in administration. It's very, very hard to do that in human spaceflight and scientific discovery. And so having that united bipartisan support for the mission of NASA to really help the U.S. stay a leader in space exploration is what we really need to focus on with our stakeholders, right? We need to continue to recognize that the value of having an agency that is focused on advancing technologies and bringing those to bear, finding the ideas that are out in academia and industry that are going to help us solve these challenges for these civil missions and how they can apply to other missions as well with the Department of War. So that's one thing that we really try to stress when I go to the Hill and talk to our stakeholders. We need that constancy of purpose. We need some stability in the mission set. And we saw that from the transition from the Biden administration and Trump administration, again, to stay and focus on returning humans to the moon. And so this is really the first time in quite a while that I've seen where between either party, we tend to agree that that's the next step, that we need to go do that, because there's things that we can learn by going back to the moon that are going to help us, but there's also this national security imperative that NASA's role as a civil agency can open doors for geopolitical considerations that come behind us. And so that's what we call the soft power of NASA, and how the Artemis Accords have allowed that. The Artemis Accords have allowed for the State Department to establish relationships with countries that we may not have had relationships in the past, that open the doors for conversations that may drift into national security area and that sort of thing. And so NASA has played that role throughout its history as a soft power in geopolitics as a civil agency, and it's an important part of how our overall government operates in really advancing the technologies that we need, no matter what mission they're going to be used for. It's a very good question.
Folks, let's thank Joseph.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Joseph, thank you for letting us share Marshall Space Flight Center's 65th birthday. Thank you for reminding us of its importance to national security. Thank you for reminding us of its economic impact. And it's exciting to think about a sustained presence on the moon. 60 days, Larry, you ready to sign up again, spend 60 days on the moon?
Yeah, my wife won't be happy, but I'll do it.
Yeah, last time he came down, he went home and she said, well, I'm not impressed. What on earth have you done for me lately? We had Mayor Battle with us recently, a lot of exciting things going on in Huntsville. In appreciation for your time being with us today, we're going to make a donation to the charity of your choice, the Huntsville Hospital Foundation. I think we're going to see on the screen some upcoming events. there you have looking ahead. I can't read the one back there. We're off for a couple of weeks, but next week we will be at the Virginia Sanford Theater. Let me remind you that you need to make a reservation. I think on your table you'll find a QR code that says holiday party. Either that, call the office, make a reservation if you're going to be with us next Tuesday. If you have ideas for programs, our program co-chairs are Ashley Kaplan, Jennifer Bittner-Bates. You can thank Ashley for making today's program happen. Please give them your ideas. Let me remind you, it is second Tuesday Seek Out, so if you see someone you do not know, please go over and introduce yourself. And I don't know everybody. If there's some of you don't know me, come on up and introduce yourself to me. Everybody have a great week, and we are adjourned.